What happens to your body when you meditate once a day? This video is about to reveal something incredible to you. And I already know what you're thinking. You've heard the wellness pitches before. Meditation reduces stress. It makes you calmer. Sure, fine. But that makes the very concept of meditation sound much smaller than it really is. Because what we're actually talking about is a full biological transformation that ancient monks described in spiritual terms for thousands of years, and that neuroscientists are now mapping down to the cellular level. The brain scans match the sacred texts almost perfectly. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to track your body and brain through a timeline, from the first 10 minutes of your very first session all the way to daily practice for a whole month. And at each stage, I'm going to show you exactly what is changing, why it changes, and why the science sounds almost identical to what mystics have been saying since before written language. By the end of this, the word awakening is going to mean something completely different to you. Let's start right at the beginning. You sit down, you close your eyes, you take your first intentional breath. What happens in the next 10 minutes is faster and more dramatic than almost anything else you can do to your body without moving a muscle. Your brain runs on electrical waves. Right now, as you're watching this, your brain is almost certainly dominated by what are called beta waves. Beta is the frequency of active thinking, planning, worrying, scrolling, arguing with someone in your head who isn't even in the room. Beta is survival mode. It's the brain scanning the horizon for threats, even when there are no threats. For most people, this is the default setting, running all day, every day, like a car engine that never gets turned off. The moment you close your eyes and focus on your breath, something shifts. Your brain starts producing alpha waves. Alpha is the frequency of relaxed alertness. It's the feeling you get in the shower when a great idea just appears. It's that calm but awake state where your mind feels wide instead of tight. And if you go deeper, if you really settle in, you start touching theta waves. Theta is the borderland between waking and sleep. It's where deep intuition lives. It's where the most vivid, spontaneous, creative insights come from. Ancient traditions called this the space between thoughts. Neuroscientists call it a measurably distinct brain state. They're describing the same thing. But that's just the brain. What about the body? Your breath is doing something extraordinary right now. Every slow, controlled inhale you take sends a direct signal to your vagus nerve, the longest nerve in your body, running from your brainstem all the way down to your gut. That nerve is the master switch between your two nervous system states, the sympathetic system, fight or flight, and the parasympathetic system, rest and digest. Most of us are living in a low-grade sympathetic state almost constantly. Heart rate slightly elevated, muscles slightly tense, digestion slightly suppressed, cortisol slightly too high. The body is ready to run from a predator that doesn't exist. Controlled breathing physically overrides this. It forces the parasympathetic system online. Your heart rate drops, blood pressure falls. The muscles in your shoulders, your jaw, your gut, places you didn't even realize were holding tension, they start to release. That physical sensation of that people describe when they first settle into meditation, that's not relaxation. That's your body remembering what it actually feels like to not be in danger. But here's where it gets really interesting. There is a network in your brain called the default mode network, the DMN. And the DMN is arguably the most important thing we're going to talk about today. So I want you to lock this name in. Default mode network. The DMN is active when you're not focused on anything specific. It's the network that generates your internal monologue, your sense of I, your stories about who you are, what people think of you, what happened yesterday, what might happen tomorrow. Neuroscientists sometimes call it the narrative self. Spiritual traditions have a much older name for it, the ego. When you focus on your breath, really focus, tracking the sensation at your nostrils, the rise of your chest, the DMN powers down. And in that moment of reduced DMN activity, the mental chatter stops. The internal narrator goes quiet, and people describe this as feeling like coming up for air. like the noise was so constant they forgot it was noise. That's not a spiritual metaphor. That is a measurable reduction in a specific brain network, and you can feel it happen in real time. That's the first 10 minutes. Now let's talk about what happens when you keep going. You're meditating every day. Each session is still a little clunky. Your mind wanders constantly. You think about your grocery list. You wonder if you're doing it right. That's fine. That's normal. The wandering isn't the failure. The noticing that you wandered and returning to the breath, that is the practice. Every single return is a repetition, like a bicep curl for your attention. But something is already changing underneath the surface. In your endocrine system, your adrenal glands sit on top of your kidneys, and their job is to produce cortisol and adrenaline. Cortisol is your primary stress hormone. In small doses, it's useful. It sharpens focus. It helps you respond to real challenges. But most people are running chronically elevated cortisol because the brain doesn't distinguish very well between a real threat and an imagined one. Your boss's passive-aggressive email triggers the same cortisol spike as a near-miss car accident, not at the same level, but the same system. Within the first week of daily meditation, studies show measurable drops in baseline cortisol levels. The adrenal glands start producing less of it because the nervous system is spending more time in a calmer state. Your body is learning, slowly, that it doesn't need to be on high alert every single moment. And this is where something fascinating starts to happen in your behavior. You develop a gap. Before meditation, the sequence goes like this: trigger and then reaction. Someone cuts you off in traffic. You're angry. It's immediate, automatic. You don't choose it. But after even a week of daily practice, something inserts itself between the trigger and the reaction. A microsecond of space. A tiny pause where awareness exists before the emotion fully takes over. Psychology calls this emotional regulation. But here's what's wild. Spiritual traditions across every culture, from Zen Buddhism to philosophy to mysticism, have been describing this exact phenomenon for millennia. They call it the observer, or witness consciousness, the part of you that can watch a thought arise without being consumed by it, the part that can feel anger beginning and simply note, there is anger, without becoming the anger. What neuroscience is now telling us is that this observer isn't mystical, it's biological. It's what emerges when your stress hormones drop and your prefrontal cortex, the rational, high-order part of your brain, gets enough breathing room to actually come online before your reactive system takes over. The observer is real. It lives in your biology, and you can grow it. But that's not even the most dramatic change in week 1. Because at night, something is happening that most people completely overlook. When your daytime nervous system is calmer, your sleep changes. Specifically, your REM sleep deepens. REM, rapid eye movement sleep, is where your brain processes emotional experiences, consolidates memories, and essentially takes out the mental garbage from the day. When you're chronically stressed, cortisol disrupts REM sleep. You sleep, but you don't fully process. The clutter accumulates. You wake up already slightly overwhelmed. Lower cortisol means deeper REM. Deeper REM means your brain is actually cleaning house at night. People who start meditating regularly often report that their dreams become more vivid around this time. That's not coincidence. That's the brain doing deeper subconscious work because it finally has the biological conditions to do so. You're 1 week in and your body is already fundamentally different. But hold on, because weeks 2 through 4 are where things get structural. This is where I need you to really pay attention, because what I'm about to describe is one of the most remarkable things that science has documented in the last 20 years. What if I told you that your brain can physically change its own shape? This is called neuroplasticity, and for a long time, scientists thought the brain was essentially fixed in adults. You do what you want and, basically, that's all. We now know that's completely wrong. The brain is more like a living muscle than a fixed machine, and daily meditation is one of the most potent forms of exercise it can get. Let's talk about the amygdala first. The amygdala is an almond-shaped structure deep in your brain. It's your alarm system. It detects threats, triggers fear responses, and plays a central role in anxiety. In people with chronic stress or anxiety disorders, the amygdala is often overactive and, in some studies, physically larger. It's a fear center that's been worked out too hard for too long. Here's what researchers at Harvard found when they studied people who completed an 8-week mindfulness program. The physical volume of the amygdala shrank, not the activity, the actual tissue. The structure got smaller, and participants reported corresponding reductions in stress and anxiety that matched the physical changes. Let that sink in. You can shrink your brain's fear center by sitting quietly and paying attention to your breath for 20 minutes a day. But the brain doesn't just shrink in one place, it grows in another. The prefrontal cortex, the region right behind your forehead, is responsible for things like rational decision-making, empathy, impulse control, and what researchers call higher-order awareness. It's the part of the brain that makes you human in the most complex sense. And in long-term meditators, this region physically thickens. The cortical tissue gets denser, more neural connections form. Sarah Lazar at Harvard measured this directly. Experienced meditators had significantly more gray matter in the prefrontal cortex than non-meditators of the same age. And crucially, this thickening was most pronounced in regions associated with attention and the integration of emotional and sensory information. Think about what that means practically. You are literally building more brain in the area responsible for wisdom, compassion, and conscious awareness, and losing density in the area responsible for fear and reactivity. If you were designing a biological upgrade for a human being, you couldn't draw it up better than this. There's one more structure worth mentioning here: the hippocampus. The hippocampus is your brain's memory and emotional processing center. It's also one of the regions most vulnerable to damage from chronic cortisol. Stress literally degrades it over time, but in meditators, gray matter density in the hippocampus increases. It becomes more robust, and researchers connect this to something that's hard to quantify, but easy to recognize when you feel it: a deeper, more grounded intuition. A sense of being anchored in your own experience rather than blown around by it. Ancient traditions called this wisdom seated in the body. Neuroscience calls it enhanced hippocampal connectivity. Same thing. And now we go long, month 1 through 6. This is where the actual biology starts to sound almost impossible. Let's start with your DNA. Inside every cell in your body, your chromosomes are capped by structures called telomeres. Think of them like the plastic tips on the end of a shoelace. Their job is to protect the chromosome from fraying as cells divide. And here's the thing, telomeres shorten with age. Every time a cell divides, the telomere gets a little smaller. When they get too short, the cell can no longer divide properly. This is one of the primary biological mechanisms of aging. Chronic stress accelerates telomere shortening. Cortisol is essentially corrosive to them, but researchers studying long-term meditators found something remarkable. Their telomeres were significantly longer than non-meditators of the same age, and the enzyme that repairs and maintains telomeres, called telomerase, was measurably more active in people with consistent meditation practices. You are, at the cellular level, aging more slowly. Ancient traditions in India and China spoke of preserving vital life force through stillness, prana, chi. They didn't have the language of telomeres, but they were observing something real. The stillness was protecting something, and now we know what. But the cellular changes are almost secondary to what's happening in your reward system. Your brain runs on dopamine. Dopamine is the molecule of motivation and pleasure, and in the modern world, we have essentially hacked our own dopamine systems into chaos. Social media, junk food, constant novelty, these things create sharp, artificial dopamine spikes followed by crashes. Over time, your baseline dopamine sensitivity drops. You need more stimulation to feel the same level of satisfaction. The ordinary moments of life start to feel flat, dull, not enough. Long-term meditation practice normalizes this. Studies show that experienced meditators have a more stable baseline dopamine level. Their reward circuitry isn't craving the next spike. And what this produces is something that sounds almost unbelievable until you experience it yourself: genuine contentment in simple existence. A cup of tea, sunlight on a wall, the sound of rain. these things become genuinely satisfying in a way they haven't been since childhood. Not because you've lowered your standards or given up on ambition, but because your brain has recalibrated what counts as enough. This is what contemplative traditions across every culture describe as inner peace, and it has a precise neurochemical signature. Now, the default mode network again. Remember the DMN, the ego network, the internal narrator, the generator of self-referential thought? We talked about how a single meditation session temporarily quiets it. But here's what happens after months of consistent practice. The DMN stays quieter, even when you're not meditating. Neuroscientists studying long-term meditators found that their DMN activity was measurably reduced during ordinary waking life, not just during formal practice. The ego-driven, self-referential, time-traveling mental chatter was simply less dominant as a baseline state of being. And this is where we arrive at something that I think is the most profound finding in this entire field. Because when the DMN is chronically quieter, the boundaries between self and not self become less rigid. The felt sense of being a separate, isolated individual, a self that ends at the skin, begins to soften. People describe feeling more connected to other people, to their environment, to something larger than their individual story. Spiritual traditions have a name for this. They call it oneness, or non-duality, or the dissolution of the ego. Mystics across thousands of years have described it as the most profound experience available to a human being. Neuroscience now has a name for it too. Reduced default mode network activity correlated with decreased self-referential processing and increased feelings of interconnectedness. Same experience, two different languages. One is ancient, one is modern. Both are pointing at something real. The science is in. The practice works. The only question is whether you start today. If you found this video helpful, like and drop a comment below and tell me where you are in your own practice. Day 1? Week 1? Month 1? Or are you still skeptical? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you haven't subscribed yet, do it now, because we're going deep on this channel. Consciousness, neuroscience, the places where ancient wisdom and modern science collide. You don't want to miss what's coming next.